Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Make It Monday. Thank you all for joining me here on this Make It Monday, as we are going to be actually designing the mobile and tablet breakpoints for a previous Make It Monday that we have created. So if you are wanting to follow along, you can grab the assets from the link in the description, join the community and grab the assets. You're also probably going to want to follow one of the previous Make It Mondays, which should be linked in the description below as well, where we actually designed the desktop version of today's website. The second thing that I want to mention is, since this Make It Monday is not live, if you have any questions that you want to get answered, the best and most effective way to get those questions answered is by joining the community. So again, that link is in the description. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So if you guys have been following the Make It Mondays for a little bit now, you probably remember us building this website inside of Wix Studio. And it's actually a really cool website, and I do think this one is kind of a more complex one. So I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of show you guys how to potentially build the tablet and mobile breakpoints for this one in particular. Two things that I want to mention is, I know a lot of maybe even new users, when they add a really cool effect to desktop, they really want to make sure that that cool effect also works on tablet and mobile, but that doesn't always work out. And sometimes you do need to find new ways to show off the design for the smaller breakpoints. You have less real estate, so you need to use it more effectively. And sometimes that does mean removing the effect, or even potentially removing specific content or sections that maybe don't add too much value to the page overall. That also applies to sections that are really long on mobile. You don't really want your users to get scroll fatigue by scrolling down a really long section. So I highly suggest, if you have like really long sections with like maybe a testimonial section with like 100 reviews, you know, on desktop, that may not take that long for the user to scroll past, but for mobile, that's going to take ages. So if we continue using the testimonials example, maybe show off 3 or 4 testimonials instead of like 100. Or if it's just a section that maybe doesn't add too much value to the page, you can also consider just removing the section altogether. But without further ado, let's go ahead and start designing this website for tablet and mobile. But before we actually jump over to those other breakpoints, I do want to mention here on desktop, I typically like to prepare the other breakpoints the best I can. So for example, for this text element here, if we come over to the font size, you'll notice that we did not set a min and max value for this font. Now, I don't typically set a max value, but I do believe a minimum value is very important, because especially for paragraph elements like this one right here, you know, on desktop, we have this set to 18 pixels, but if we jump all the way down to mobile, we'll see that this is 5 pixels, and that is not going to be readable for any user at that screen size. So what I first like to do is go through all the text elements and kind of set a minimum value. So for this heading text here, I might set this to like 24 pixels. For paragraphs, I always set these to 13 pixels because I really think that that's kind of like the smallest you can go, where it's actually big enough for most people to be able to read it. So I'm going to go through and kind of add the different minimum values. So for this one, we might want to set this minimum value to maybe 16 pixels. And again, we're going to want to make sure that we have 13 for the minimum for this one. For this one right here, let's go ahead and just set this to 24. And again, for this paragraph text, we'll set this to 13. For this one right here, it's already 13, so we don't want this to get any smaller, so we'll set this to 13. And because this is in a repeater, it should have already applied that to all the other items inside the repeater. For this text right here, it's 35. So again, we're just going to set this to 24. This text right here, it's already 13. So again, we don't want it to get any smaller. We'll just set the minimum to 13. This one right here is 52. So maybe for this one, we can do 32. This text right here is 40. So let's just set this one to 24. And then last but not least, this one right here is 35. So again, we'll do 24. Okay. Now let's go ahead and move on to the tablet breakpoint. Here is where we're gonna make a few changes. For example, this background image here, we do have a shape divider. So I might want to customize the height of this to be a little bit lower. So maybe like 64. I think that looks a little bit cleaner here. And if we go back up to desktop, you'll notice it does not change it here. It only changes it for this breakpoint, which is pretty nice. And then for this section right here, where we have this little video with some text here, I might want to actually switch this from columns to rows. And I also might want to grab the cell itself. So because the image is so large, what I can do is just grab this cell, and we can swap them. So we should have something that looks like this. So for this stack right here, let's go ahead and position it here in the center. Something like that. And then for this text, let's go ahead and expand it out a little bit. Something like this, okay? And I just wanna grab the stack here and we'll add like 24 pixels of spacing in between the items. And for this image, we can even make it a little bit bigger. And we can also just remove the margin here. Or maybe we can add like 10 and 10. So 10 on the top and then 10 on the bottom. Should look pretty good. Perfect. I think that looks really clean. And once again, we will just make sure that this is centered inside of this cell here. For this image, we obviously don't need it to be this big. So we're going to just go ahead and resize it, bring this down quite a bit, and we'll place it right about here. If we wanted to, we could even kind of adjust this to maybe be negative 32% and bring it up a little bit. And then let's resize this cell here. And then let's grab the section and we can resize the section. Perfect. I think that looks pretty clean. But what I will say is we also need to kind of adjust the header. And we also need to start adjusting the buttons here, because if I grab this button, we can see it's really small and the text itself is already below our minimum font size. So let's just go ahead and do the button really quickly. Typically for tablet, I typically set the responsive behavior from scale proportionately to fixed. Then I set the width to maybe be 120 and the height to maybe like 42, something like that for now. And for the text, we'll bump this up to 13 pixels. So now we should have something that looks like this, and it looks a little bit nicer. And I'm going to kind of adjust the spacing here a little bit in between these items as well. And if we wanted to, we could even adjust the height of the section a little bit. That way the button isn't so close to the bottom. So we'll just do something a little bit lower like that. Great. Now let's go ahead and work on the header. For this, I do think it might be time for this part to just go to like a mobile menu, hamburger menu. So what I want to do with the logo is I want to set this to lock the aspect ratio. And for the width, I think I want to do like 80. Perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and hide this menu here. We'll go ahead and do that over here as well. And for this logo, let's go ahead and move this over to this side. And then we actually have the hamburger menu here. So what I'm going to do is grab both of these cells and we're going to swap them. And then I'm going to grab this cell and swap them. So now our hamburger menu should be right here. And we're just going to change this to a white color. And then for this logo, we're going to send this to the left. And for the hamburger menu, we'll send this one to the right. Perfect. So now we should have something that looks like this for our hero section on our website. And I think that looks pretty clean. Now let's go ahead and move down to this section here. I will say for iPad or for a tablet, this size should be okay. So we'll go ahead and leave this one as is. Or what we could do is add, let's say, a cell below. So now we should have something that looks like this, and we'll split this into two. So we should have something that looks like this. So then we can grab these items and swap them. And we can grab these items and swap them. And then for this one, we could hide it. And we can do the same for this one here. And now if we grab this section itself and we can equalize the grid. And honestly, that kind of has a cool look, but that's not what we're going for. So let's just resize this down and we'll make sure it is centered. Same with this one over here. We'll resize it, center it, and we're going to want to equalize the grid again. Hopefully it doesn't mess anything up. Okay, it doesn't seem to be working. So what I'm going to do is just kind of manually do it. So what I'm going to do now is, because it's not really, or getting to the point where I really like it on tablet, what I'm going to do is actually create a brand new section. And instead of using the cell layout, what I'm going to do is use a flex box. So I'm going to come over to the add panel. We'll go to layout tools, flex boxes, and we are going to choose this one right here. I'm going to set the width of this to be 100%. And then I'm going to add 2 items. And then inside of each of these items, let's just remove the background color. Perfect. And then what I want to do is just bring the logos from the cells above. And we'll place this inside of the layouter items right below it. Perfect. And we'll just make sure that these items are completely centered inside of the items. Okay. And let's grab the layouter or the flex box. We'll send it to the top. We'll grab the section and remove the height. Then we can delete this section here because we basically recreated it. And now if we go back down to tablet, what we can now do is switch this flex box from columns to bricks. And what we want to do is set the item alignment from start to center. And we should have something that looks like this. And for each one of these widths, let's set this to, I'm going to set this to 32 for each one of these. So now we should have 3 across and then 2 on the bottom. And I think that looks pretty clean for the tablet breakpoint. I will say we probably do need to add a little bit of space because we don't want the bottom of this to basically hit the top of this one. So let's add the 7.3 VW to the top of this one. Perfect. And I think that looks pretty good. We can even resize these logos a little bit inside of these boxes so they're not, some of them aren't so big and some of them aren't too small. Perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to this one right here. So this one is going to be a little bit simple because all we really need to do for the majority of this is just switch this from column to rows. And now we should have something that looks like this. I will say this is a bit big. So what we can do for this is kind of resize this. And we're gonna also change the height of these items. So let's set these to be like 120 in height. Okay. And let's go ahead and resize this image to basically fill the height of this item or the cell item. Okay. And if we grab the section itself, let's add 24 pixels as spacing in between, I think that looks pretty good. I do want to bring this in a little bit. Something like that should do. And you'll notice we're already at 13 pixels here. So it's good that we set the minimum on the desktop. And then for this repeater here, let's add a little bit more spacing. So let's do like 8 and 8. And then for the height of the repeater, let's set this to like 80 pixels. So now we should have something that looks a little bit cleaner like that. Fantastic. I am going to grab this section and bring it down a little bit. And with this stack, we should also go ahead and apply a minimum. We already have that. So let's go ahead and set this to be maybe 12 VW. So that way, if the section gets any smaller, the button doesn't disappear behind this repeater here. And what I want to do is I want to right click this button over here. We'll copy from all breakpoints. And I'm just going to click this on this button here. Perfect. So now the only thing we need to do is set the height to 120, or the width to 120 and the height to 50. Perfect. And if we wanted to, we could also kind of adjust the spacing in between the items here. I think that looks pretty good. And now we can grab the section height and then just remove it. Perfect. So this is going to be that new section here. And I think that looks pretty clean. Now let's go ahead and move on to this one here. So for this one, I do think we can probably get away with just kind of making this a little bit longer. So for this repeater, I did add margin on the left and right. So let's just go ahead and change that from 10 or 20, from 20 to 10. And see what that gives us. Okay. Maybe we actually just straight up remove it and we set it to 0 and see what that does. Okay. I think that's fine, but I think what the problem is we just need to expand the text element a little bit. Okay. And we'll also make sure that this text element is centered. Okay. And for this icon, instead of it being 33 pixels, let's go ahead and set it to like 42. And now that we have everything properly sized, we can now grab the repeater and let's see what happens when we add the 10% margin on the left and the right. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. The only thing I would maybe say is if we grab this image and maybe we add 10% margin to the top, I think that would give us a little bit more space here. And for the background color for the section, we'll just make sure we set that to black. Or you can see it's not even black. We can see like a straight line here. So what I can do is come over to Tools, Editor Add-ons, get add-on. We'll do the color selection. We'll add that to the page. Perfect. And what I can do is select this color right here. And you can see we got that color copied. So now we can grab the section again. And for the background color, we're just going to add the color that we copied to the background. Okay. Okay, and that made it look a lot cleaner. Now let's go ahead and move on to this section right here. And actually, this one already looks good, so I don't even really want to touch it here on this breakpoint. Same with this section. This section right here, let's go ahead and change this one a little bit. Let's go ahead and actually, let me go ahead and open this up real quick, go to the bottom. Okay, so it's the image above the container. So we're gonna grab the image, and then for the corners, instead of doing 96, let's do like 48. Perfect. Also, for this text right here, I don't know why it's centered here, so we're gonna left align it. Make sure it's aligned to the left. And then for this button, once again, we're going to grab this button up here from all breakpoints, and we're just going to paste it. And then we're going to change the size manually to 120 and 50. Perfect. And then with this stack selected, let's also just add maybe 5% padding on the top, or margin on the top and the bottom, to kind of expand the box a little bit and give us a little bit more space. Fantastic. The last thing is the footer. And honestly, the footer is okay. So I might lower this font size a little bit. And honestly, for the little copyright thing, I sometimes go down to 10 pixels, no line to the left. So for this one, I think this looks pretty good. I might make the logo a smidge bigger. And then maybe even like these icons here, because these would be kind of hard to tap on. So icon size from 16, I typically do like 24. And because we are on a tablet and they're trying to tap, we don't want them to actually accidentally tap the one that they're not trying to click. So we can even add a little bit more spacing in between the items. So now we should have something that looks like this. Great. So tablet is now complete. Let's go ahead and move on down to mobile. So mobile, I feel like we have a good size for the logo. So we'll just bump that back up to 80. I still think that looks pretty good and will work here. For this text here, what I might want to do is add a little bit more margin here. So instead of 14 or 15, let's do like 24. So it's going to bring it down. Perfect. Let's also just bring down the section as well. For this paragraph, let's just go ahead and make it expand the full way. For this image, we'll just kind of expand it or make it a little bit bigger. Okay. I think that's going to have to do for mobile. I might want to add a little bit more margin to the top. So let's do like 28%. Okay. And then we can expand the section down a smidge more. Okay. For mobile, for this little video thing here, let's just go ahead and bring this text all the way over here. And we'll just keep doing that until it looks a little bit cleaner. We'll also expand the spacing in between the items just a smidge. And then we might as well convert this from a horizontal stack to a vertical stack. And even switching the items placement. So we're basically making the image on top. We can even make the image a little bit bigger. And if we grab both of these items, and if we grab the stack, we can even set an item spacing of like 12 pixels. I think that looks clean. And I kind of want to send the stack to the left, but I do want this text element to kind of span the full way across. Something like that. I think that looks pretty clean. We can kind of check the responsiveness here. I think that looks pretty good. But what I would say is for this stack, let's just go ahead and remove the top and the bottom margin. So we should have something that looks like that. And I think that looks pretty clean. We could even potentially set a negative margin of like 40 pixels. So this video is kind of right behind this image here. That's personal preference. But in all honesty, if it was me, I don't know how important this video would actually be. So if it wasn't too important, what I would do is actually just hide this from the mobile breakpoint. So now we're just left with that. That's personally what I would do. But for the next section, for these logos here, I would set each one of these to maybe, actually, let's set this to like 40%. And we'll kind of do that for each one of these items here. And then we can resize the items so they're a little bit bigger inside of them. So we'll resize it, center it, and we'll do that for each one of these. Great. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next section. I like how this part looks already, so we'll just leave that as is. We might want to adjust this vertical spacing a little bit, so we'll do 24 pixels. Let's grab this text element and stretch it across. Let's add a little bit more spacing in between. Okay. Let's grab this elements button. We'll paste it to this one. Okay, it's not letting me do it, so I'm just gonna manually set the width. Oh, I see what happened. I forgot to set the responsive behavior for the button on tablet. So on tablet, responsive behavior, set this to fixed. And then on mobile, it should fix it here. But because I've already started editing it here, it might have overridden that. So make sure if you're on tablet to go ahead and set the button to fixed. And maybe I can do that for this button down here really quickly in hopes that it kind of does that for the mobile breakpoint down here, which it did. Perfect. Okay, back up to this section. What I want to do with this repeater is instead of 2 items per row, let's just set it to 1 item per row. Let's set the height for the repeater item, again to 80. And for the space in between the items, let's up this to 8 pixels. So we'll kind of just double it. And with the repeater selected, or no, with the stack selected, let's set the bottom margin to like 24, just to give us a little bit more space for the button. And I think that looks pretty good. Great. Now let's move on to this section here. The first thing I want to do is grab the background image, and I want to give it like a 40% margin. So we're pushing it down quite a bit. I will say for this text here, it might be a little bit too big. So let's move this down to 16 pixels, and we can even stretch it to be the full width. Actually, I think that width is good, so we'll go ahead and do that. For these items here, I want to remove the margin on the left and the right. And for the icon, let's set these to 32 pixels. Perfect. And then for this text, we'll go and expand this. And we'll make sure that the stack that we have selected is sent to the left. And we still need a little bit more space. So what might actually end up working the best is if we switch the number of items per row to 1, then we can grab this stack here, or then we can grab this text element here, then we can grab the stack and make sure it is centered inside of the item. And let's give it a little bit of item spacing. And then if we grab the repeater itself, we can give it some more vertical spacing. So maybe like if we do the 12.8 pixels, let's see what that looks like. I think that looks okay, but I might even double it. So let's do like 24 pixels. And we can even go a smidge bigger since we are doing just 1 per row now. So let's do like 48. Okay, I think that looks pretty good like that. Great. The only thing I would maybe change is this gap in between to kind of match the spacing in between the items here. So we'll do like 24. I think that looks good. But now we need to push this image, this background image, down a little bit more because you can see it's kind of overlaying the ship here. So let's go down to like 50%. Okay. I think that looks pretty clean. Alternatively, for this text, we could even just go all the way across. So it looks like that. I do think that looks a little bit cleaner. So let's grab the stack and center it. Okay, perfect. For this section down here, you know, we didn't really have to edit it too much or at all actually on the tablet breakpoint. But for here, obviously this is pretty different to what our design is intended to look like. So let's just adjust the size to like 22 pixels of this text. That looks pretty good, but I think we can go a little bit lower. Let's do like 18. Perfect. Okay. Now let's grab this section and let's make it a little bit taller. Something right about there. And then let's grab these images and just kind of bring them down a little bit. Okay. I think that looks pretty clean. For this next one, we're just going to stretch this text all the way across. So easy as that. And then for these images, what we're going to do is I want to check these images and see if there's any like margin applied to them. And it doesn't look like there is, so or bottom margin. But I do want this to have the same, so we'll do like 29%. So we'll dock it to the top. And we'll just apply 30% margin. Okay. I will also say we maybe don't need this much space here on mobile in between the items. So maybe we can set this to like 16 and all the images will get a smidge bigger. And then if we grab the section, we can then set the height to 0. And it should have fixed it, but let's see what the problem is. So we know for a fact that none of these images have a bottom margin. If I click on the item itself, we can also see that they don't have a height on it. So if I just resize it, nothing happens. Interesting. And if I grab the flex box, there it is. The flex box itself had a minimum height, so we can just remove that there. Okay. For this one right here, for the call to action, what we're going to want to do is we have this container here. Inside of this container, if we go up to desktop, I kind of want to see how this was built. It seems like I did not actually even put these in a grid system. So that would probably be the best way to do it, but all I'm really going to need to do is expand the text out to look like this. And I do want to make this section quite a bit larger for now while we kind of edit it. So I'm just going to set this to be like 500 pixels. And for this stack right here, we're just going to send it to the bottom with 5% margin on the bottom, something like that. And then this image right here, we can just make it quite a bit larger and center it. And now we can just raise the section to something like that. And I think that looks pretty clean for our call to action. And then for the footer, what I would actually do is switch this from column to rows. So we should have something that looks like this. I will say I would want this copyright thing to be at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is, using my shift key, is grab both of them and swap them. And then I will also again say I want these two to be swapped. So we'll go ahead and swap these. So the logo is going to be at the very top. Then it's going to be social media, which we're going to just center inside of the cell. And then for this copyright notice, we'll center the text. Just for fun, we'll make it 13 pixels. And for this logo, let's set this to a fixed size and we'll set it to 80. And now what we can do is set the height of the section to 0. And we can just add a little bit of margin to these items. So maybe like 10% on the top and bottom of this logo. For this copyright, let's do like 2% on the top and bottom. And then for the social bar, let's go back into it and we'll raise the size to like 32 pixels with like a 16 pixel spacing. And then we'll also add 5% to the bottom spacing. Okay. So now we are basically done designing the B&Q website on tablet and mobile. So this is going to be so if we just go ahead and press preview, here is going to be the mobile breakpoint here, and it looks pretty clean. You can see the little thing is kind of moving up, so we should probably actually adjust that so it doesn't move up so much and it starts a little bit lower. So let's go ahead and do that really quickly. So we'll grab this guy and we'll bump him down to like 40%. Actually, we'll do 50. So now when we preview the website, he shouldn't move up as much. I think that looks pretty clean. Great. Now let's just go ahead and check out the tablet breakpoint here. So go up to the very top. And here is the effect for this one. Again, we should probably move that one down a little bit and maybe even resize it. But overall, I think we are done and I think it looks really clean. Well, I just want to say thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's Make It Monday. Again, if you have any questions or you want the assets to follow along with me, you can join the community in the description below. Thank you all for watching and I'll see y'all in the next Make It Monday.